Hi guys. Well, I want you to find your My State notebook and turn to page 31. It's going to look like this where it says government at the top. So look for page 31 in your My State notebook and get your pen ready. Okay? I have hair sticking up. Okay. Hopefully your hair looks great today. Page 31. We're going to fill in some blanks today. At the very top, you'll notice that it says the seat of my state's government is what? Our capital city. So you already know that capital Denver, and when I mean capital letter. So capital letter Denver goes in that top blank right up there. Okay? The chief state official is the governor. You might have just saw it, but does anybody know who our governor is? Jared Polis. And this is how you spell his name. So you're going to write that. Our governor is Jared Polis. Write his name correctly with capitals. You don't want to misspell someone's name. You wouldn't like it if your name was misspelled. Okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about a governor. In order to be a governor, you have to be 30 years old. So none of us can make it yet. Well, I could. You have to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to be, it makes sense. You have to be a resident. That means you have to live in that state for at least 2 years before you could even be elected. So you can't move in and then within 1 year be the governor of that state that you just moved to. You have to have lived in the state for 2 years. You can serve, if you're the governor, for 4 years. And let's see. That's all we'll talk about for the governor. Okay? The next one we're going to talk about is the next blank there. It says, my state sends 2 U.S. senators to represent us in Washington. Remember we talked a little bit about what it was like to represent. We said if Tucker went to the office and was was going to represent the 4th grade, and this is what we agreed on, and asked Mr. Boggs if, whatever. Okay, so we have real state senators that go to Washington for us and discuss the things that we as a state in Colorado want. We can't all go to Washington, D.C., so we pick someone to go for us and to fight for us and to tell the people in Washington, D.C. what we want. Okay, so our 2 U.S. senators are, the first one is Cory Gardner. Here's how you spell his name. Cory Gardner. And Cory Gardner is a Republican. And then our second one is Michael Bennet. And Michael Bennet is a Democrat. Okay, make sure you spell their names correctly on those lines. Now, in order to be a senator, you have to have some qualifications too. So if you ever want to be one of these, a governor or a senator, these are some of the qualifications. You have to be, again, 30 years old. You have to have been a U.S. citizen, so you have to be living in the United States for at least 9 years. And you have to be a legal inhabitant. An inhabitant is somebody that inhabits something, so you have to live somewhere. Okay, you have to be legal and in the state that you represent. So if you want to be representing Colorado, well, you better live in Colorado, which makes sense, right? Okay, part of their job, if you're a senator, is to write and vote on new laws, and those laws are called bills. Now, a bill becomes a law after it is passed by both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, which we haven't talked about yet, and then signed by the president. So it's a pretty big deal. Okay, these people, senators, are elected by the people that are living in their state. And we have 100 senators in Congress, and which we have 50 states, so each state has 2 senators. Okay, and our 2 senators are Cory Gardner and Michael Bennet. And there you go again. And there's Jared Polis. If you need it one more time, you could freeze it. Okay? All right. We also elect, here's the next blank, we also elect 7 U.S. representatives to represent us in Congress. This is the name of your representative, okay? So if you're living in Loveland, Fort Collins, Wellington, LaPorte, okay, if you live in any of those cities or those towns, your person that you're going to write down in this blank is Joe Neguse. And here's how you spell his name. Joe Neguse. Okay, now if you're living in Windsor, I'm thinking of a couple people, Emmy, that live in Windsor. Caden. Then it's Ken Buck. I think you live in Windsor, Caden. Is that true? So Ken Buck, if you're living in Windsor, you're going to put Ken Buck in the blank if you live in Windsor. Otherwise, you're going to put Joe Neguse in the blank, that last blank on your page. Now, if you'll notice here on this page, they also want you to find some pictures. So you're going to find a picture of Jared Polis, our governor. You're going to find a picture of one of our senators. So you're going to find a picture of either Cory Gardner or Michael Bennet. And you're going to put his picture there. Do you see where you're going to put it? And then you're going to find a picture of one of your representatives here. Okay? So we have 7 representatives in Colorado, but in our area of Colorado, okay, so if you were to look at a map, our 7 representatives, they each take a section of Colorado. And so Joe Neguse has Fort Collins and Boulder and Vail and I think Loveland. And then Ken Buck has Windsor and I think kind of out east. All right? So they're in charge of that because, you know, they have a lot of people that they would have to talk to. And so they're just in charge of a certain area of Colorado. Okay, now the House of Representatives, we said, kind of gets together and signs the bill, one of those laws. The House of Representatives, also known as the House, okay, their main job is to pass federal legislation that affects the entire country. Big deal, don't you think? Okay. Their powers are, number 1, to elect the U.S. president if needed. Number 2, to impeach people. Remember what we said impeach means? Richard Nixon was impeached to remove people from office if that's necessary. Each U.S. state is represented by the population according to the census, but every state is entitled to at least 1 representative. So that means that if you live in Wyoming, there's less people living in Wyoming than in Colorado. So if you live in Wyoming, there might not be as many representatives in that state. But if you're living in Florida or California or New York, there's a lot of people living in those states. They're going to have more representatives because they have more people. Okay, so if you have less people, it's not the size of your state. So Texas, we know if we looked at a map, the state of Texas is very big. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how many people live in Texas. So if there's lots and lots of people living in Texas, they're going to have a lot of representatives. Okay, but Wyoming, that looks just about as big as us, but there's less people living in Wyoming, so there's going to be less representatives for the state of Wyoming than for Colorado. Does that make sense? Okay. If you are a U.S. representative, you would serve for only 2 years. Let's see. And your qualifications, guess what? You get to be one of these people sooner. You only have to be 25 years old. You have to be a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. And you have to be a legal inhabitant. There's that word again. You have to live in your state legally in the state that you're representing. So that would make sense too. Okay? All right, so that's a little bit about our government here in Colorado. All right, I want you to flip the page to page 33. You'll see that there's some directions at the top. It says using a red colored pencil, color your state on the map. underline the names of your state's neighbors. So you're going to color your state remember how when we do our state, we do it lightly, in one direction, make sure you're in the lines. This is a report, a project, so make sure that you're coloring very neatly, okay? Take your time. You're just doing that. And then underline the names of your state's neighbors, all of our borders. Be careful, because you can't erase your red crayon, your red pencil. Be careful that you're carefully following those directions at the top. When you're done with that, I want you to turn to page 35. Page 35, it talks about regions. It says the U.S. is divided into 7 regions or 7 parts. This map of the 7 regions also shows the date that each state entered the Union. So that's kind of interesting. I'm from Connecticut, and so my state of Connecticut entered when? Are you looking at it? In 1788. And when did Colorado enter the Union? Do you remember? There it is, in 1876. We live in the Rocky Mountain region. So I want you to very carefully color the Rocky Mountain region, and it includes all of those states. If you need to pause, that's fine. Then we also have the Pacific region. You'll notice California, Oregon, Alaska. Don't forget all of those. You're not coloring those, you're just looking. The Southwestern region is in yellow. The Midwest is in blue also, kind of like a purple. Then you have the Southeastern. All those states are the Southeastern region. The Mid-Atlantic, I don't know if you've ever heard of that phrase before. And then you may have heard of New England. That's where I'm from, New England. And that's up there in green. So right down here on the bottom, I want us to fill this in as well. I live in the Rocky Mountain region. That's what goes in that blank. Mountain, T-A-I-N. My state was the 38th state to enter the Union. Today, my state has a population of about, so this is rough, so 5.63 million people. That's a lot of people. Okay, and if you looked it up for 2020, you might come up with a different number. All right. That's where we'll pause today.